Yep, perfectly balanced build. Thanks, Bungie. Today's build is so good, I'm still wondering why Bungie buffed it in the first place. I have been waiting years for a build that I can use to troll my friends and simultaneously put me at the top of the board for DPS, and I think I finally found it. I'm calling it the Stacey-cration, and I will die on this hill. With that said, welcome back to the channel. Festival of the Lost is out this week, and I figured what better time to give the community my take on the Stasis Titan after all the changes it received recently, and give you a build that you control each other with while actually doing the objective. And what's even better is if multiple people are running this build, it synergizes together way better than I actually expected it to, making it perfect for the Festival of the Lost activity. With the recent buff that Stasis Titan received, Behemoth is crushing it in total damage and sustained DPS, hitting numbers so high that heavy weapons are jealous. But it's also one of the most insane crowd control setups available right now, with fantastic survivability that the subclass just inherently has. You could be doing -50 content, and with the right class setup, you'll have 8 stacks of frost armor up the entire time for insane damage resist, infinite healing from the endless stream of stasis shards, and infinite stacks of armor charge for whatever armor setup you want. You can run this build with basically any armor set, so you don't even need tier 5 armor, which makes this build I'm about to show you really accessible to any and every player just starting out. So if this sounds like fun to you, then please leave a like on the video, and if you're a warlock or a hunter, why not subscribe so that when I make a build for you, you'll be the first to know about it. Now let's get into it. Stasis Titan just received a massive buff to Howl of the Storm, which is the first aspect in this build. The change doubled the number of stasis crystals spawned by this aspect, creating a crystal formation in a V shape. This small change was enough to shift this aspect from being just okay to holy crap, this crowd control is better than stasis turrets. This is basically the stasis twin brother of Consecration, only instead of an ignition we freeze and shatter. The best part of this aspect, in my opinion, is that you don't need kills to keep this build going. If you get the distance on your melee wrong, or your teammate steals the kill, it won't affect you at all, because you'll be able to destroy your stasis crystals and instantly get all of your abilities back. Stasis crystals have always done pretty good damage at base, and with this aspect, all stasis crystals generated thanks to this build count as melee damage, so this means it will benefit from exotics that boost melee damage, weapons and armor perks that interact with melee damage, along with stat boosts, all while still acting like stasis crystals that freeze and shatter enemies. This means Syntheseps, Worm Gods, 1-2 Punch, Grave Robber, and even Saint's Fist on Bastion all benefit from the crystals being considered melee damage. The best aspect to pair with Howl of the Storm is easily Tectonic Harvest. When shattering a stasis crystal or a frozen target, you generate stasis shards. These stasis shards will refund some of your melee energy, feeding into the ability loop to give you infinite abilities. And there's no cooldown on the stasis shard generation. Every crystal you destroy, even if it's not your own, will generate a stasis shard, making the ability loop really easy to maintain. The second half of Tectonic Harvest that makes this aspect really shine is when picking up a stasis shard, you gain a stack of frost armor. Since you can make up to 8 stasis crystals with a single melee, this effectively gives you access to the maximum amount of frost armor from one ability use. And thanks to our setup, you will instantly refund all of your melee ability and then some. You could honestly say that the build is complete with just the aspects alone. That's how strong the pairing is, and we haven't even introduced fragments yet. But in saying that, the first fragment that we're adding to the build is Whisper of Conduction. This makes it so that stasis shards will track towards you, making it easier to run and gun without having to collect the stasis shards. This is a massive quality of life fragment that makes the build feel really easy and fluid to use. The tracking distance on the stasis shards is somewhat small, but so long as you're within melee distance, you'll notice that this fragment is extremely useful. Pairing with Whisper of Conduction, we're going to rock Whisper of Hunger. This increases the melee energy gained from picking up a stasis shard. This fragment makes the build so easy to use, it's brainless. The size of the stasis crystal determines the size of the stasis shard, which determines the amount of melee energy returned. Blech. But every stasis shard will refund about 1/3 of your melee ability. So don't really worry about which crystal you're breaking, just break them. And because you're generating 8 stasis crystals per melee, you'll be able to almost completely refund both melee abilities from a single use. Meaning if you accidentally used your regular melee, or you haven't collected your stasis shards from your previous melee yet, then you'll be able to recharge your abilities much easier thanks to this fragment. It almost feels like cheating having Whisper of Hunger for this build because of the infinite ability spam. Now, since this is a melee build, getting close and staying close can be quite difficult, especially in difficult content, and so we're adding Whisper of Rhyme to the build to help with this. This fragment will increase the duration of Frost Armor, allowing you to stay with damage resistance for longer, and lets you increase the maximum stacks from 5 to 8. This will give you increased damage resistance as well, allowing you to tank even more damage while you fight up close. The best part about this is you can give yourself Frost Armor by using your ability outside of combat, refund your melee ability, and then charge into the fight with maximum Frost Armor. This setup will keep your Frost Armor stacks maxed out the entire fight, so long as you remember to collect a Stasis Shard once every 13 seconds. And finally, what better fragment to pair with Stasis Crystals than Whisper of Fissures? This fragment increases the size and damage of the shatter from Stasis Crystals and frozen enemies. It basically makes every crystal hit like a truck, and the damage from melee-based Stasis Crystals will have the damage buff from Whisper of Fissures stack with the melee buffs from other sources. Having Whisper of Fissures on gives the build increased range on crystal explosions and increases the overall DPS of the build when using it for boss DPS. Now for our weapons on the build, because it's so ability focused that our choice of weapons don't really matter. When trying to decide on your loadout, you should be trying to focus on achieving the following: handling champions in your current activity, increasing your DPS and ad clear while you spawn your melee ability, and finding a way to shatter your Stasis Crystals without enemies. Haunted Altars of Sorrow doesn't have any champions in it, but if you want to take this build into other content, then you should account for champions in that activity. This build inherently handles overloads because of Stasis Freeze now stunning overloads, so all you would need to do is run something like Mint Retrograde with Anti-Barrier Pulse and Energy Acceleration from the artifact, and boom, you have all 3 champion types covered. I just want to point out that Mint is actually the best weapon for all 3 of these categories, since it does great damage, can handle 2 champion types, and does enough AoE damage to clear out the crystals for you. However, that doesn't stop us from choosing weapons in the energy or heavy slot that take our build to the next level. The best exotics for this are Tractor Cannon and Finality's Augur from Sundered Doctrine. Tractor Cannon would be fantastic when you're running with a fire team because it will increase everyone's DPS, including your own, by applying a 30% debuff to every enemy that you're fighting. But if you're running solo or someone else is on debuff duty, then Finality's Augur should definitely be your pick. This gun lets you put down a turret that can help you ad clear, or it can boost your DPS and super regen when fighting a boss. Like, just look how nasty this super regen is. I'm getting my super back in under 10 seconds. And you don't have to run either of these exotics, they just pair well with the build. Other really good options for this build are Dead Messenger, because it's also a wave frame that shoots in a V formation, or Icebreaker, because shooting frozen targets and Stasis Crystals will cause an ignition. This is actually one of the better pairings as well, so go for it if you want to try it out. Now for your exotic armor of choice, there are actually so many that work with Stasis Titan, I'm like a deer in headlights. There's 2 routes that you can go with this build. You can lean all into the damage, and in the footage you're seeing, I've been running Worm God for the majority of the time, because the shatter from the Stasis Crystals counts as melee ability damage, allowing the damage to trigger and scale with the exotic perk. Honestly, at minus 30, Worm God feels like a bit of an overkill for most activities, and that's what made it so much fun for me. Being able to just run up to a group of enemies, freeze them, and immediately gain maximum stacks of Worm God is fantastic. The downside to Worm Gods is that it won't buff the damage of Stasis Crystals generated by the Behemoth Super, since these are considered super damage and not melee damage. If you plan to run Behemoth more than the regular melee, then Synthoceps will give you the best of both worlds, buffing the damage of your Stasis Crystals both in super and out of super. Alternatively, you could lean into the tank playstyle, and which is especially strong when running seasonal conquests or fireteam specific content but solo. And the best exotic for this playstyle is Icefall Mantle, because popping your class ability will instantly heal you, and it gives you maximum frost armor stacks. But the best part of the exotic is every time you pick up a Stasis Shard, because it gives you frost armor, it will heal you for a decent chunk of HP. This could be key in the moments when you need the extra health, and it can be very helpful if you do something stupid and get yourself into a bad position, which is definitely not something I do regularly, I swear. For the rest of your armor, and the mods and the stats on this build, I actually want to work backwards a bit. Because we have access to so many stasis shards in this build, if we run elemental charge on our boots, we have access to armor charges like it's primary ammo, meaning infinite uptime on literally everything that we want. Because of this, it doesn't actually matter what your stats are, since you could effectively run font mods in every slot and have them active all the time, which is what makes this build super accessible to new players. You'll still want to prioritize getting your melee stat to 200 and your super stat to 100 or more, since the melee stat will scale the damage of your crystals, and the super stat past 100 will benefit both the regen and the damage of your crystals generated when using your super. For the other mods on your boots, I always run a scavenger for my heavy, and then a scavenger for my special if I'm planning to use them a lot. On your class item, if you want to have your class ability up, then run class fonts. Otherwise run special finisher and proximity ward to make special ammo safely, and then run Reaper for access to an extra source of orb generation. On your chest piece, run resist mods to give you even more damage reduction in harder content. On your gauntlets, if you don't have 200 melee, run enough font mods to max out this stat, and then run heavy-handed in the remaining slots. And finally, on your helmet, run super font mods so that your super has improved regen, and the stasis crystals created by your super deal increased damage. In the artifact, the best mod to complement this build is refresh threads, because we're going to be swimming in stasis shards. This is the perfect artifact perk to run, since it will improve the regen of all of our abilities whenever we pick up a stasis shard. And shield crush, since we'll have frost armor active the entire time, our melee will deal even more damage. It also gets increased regen, but honestly, you won't see this benefit because of how fast you actually get your melee back from stasis shards. Now, the gameplay loop, if it isn't obvious, is slide, melee, and then shoot, repeating over and over to just obliterate everything. Always remember to get your frost armor stacks before running into a fight, especially in difficult content. This will help you gain momentum with the build and make it much easier to survive the initial flow of the fight. The melee is extremely good for crowd control. Sending a wave of stasis crystals towards the enemies will freeze them if they are within range. And if they aren't, you'll be able to break line of sight or block their pathing with the stasis crystals, which can be really good for defense objectives. As I said at the start, this build works really well even when other players are around, and it even synergizes with other Stasis Titans insanely well, because if they generate stasis shards from their own crystals, you still gain the benefits of melee regen and frost armor. There is also the chance of getting weird boss HP chunking whenever you involve a ton of stasis crystal shattering at the same time, which is always really funny whenever it happens. So with all that said, grab your Titan and jump into the Haunted Altars of Sorrows, and give this build a try for yourself. I'm happy to hear any build suggestions in the comments, so let me know if you've tweaked the build yourself. And as always, please enjoy the rest of your day.